My name is Sydney, and I am 28 years old. I never imagined that the worst day of my life would also become the day my relationship with my parents would quietly shatter, not with a loud argument or some unforgivable betrayal, but with a simple sentence that still echoes in my head like a cruel joke. The morning my husband died felt unreal, like the world had slipped into some distorted version of itself. One moment Daniel was there, laughing, teasing me about how I always burned my toast. And the next, I was standing in a sterile hospital hallway, staring at a doctor whose lips were moving but whose words I could barely hear. When the meaning finally landed, it crushed me. My chest tightened, my knees gave way, and suddenly nothing made sense anymore. Daniel wasn't just my husband. He was my safe place, my best friend, the one person who made even the most ordinary days feel full. Losing him didn't feel like losing a person, it felt like losing my entire future. In the blur of grief and disbelief, there was only one instinct that felt natural. I needed my parents. I needed my mother's arms around me, my father's steady voice telling me I would somehow survive this. With trembling fingers, I called them, tears choking every word as I tried to explain what had happened. How Daniel was gone, how the funeral would be in 2 days. There was a pause on the other end, a silence that stretched just a little too long. And then my mother spoke with a calmness that felt almost surreal. "Sydney," she said gently, "today is your sister's birthday. We can't come." At first I thought I had misheard her. My brain simply refused to accept the sentence. I waited for the correction, for the "we'll figure something out," or "of course we'll be there." But it never came. Instead, she continued in the same measured tone, explaining how everything had already been planned, how guests were invited, how it would be too difficult to cancel at the last minute. My father didn't even speak. I could hear him in the background, but he said nothing. I remember gripping my phone so tightly my hand hurt, my heart pounding with a mixture of shock and a growing, nauseating disbelief. My husband, the man I loved, the man I had built my life with, was lying in a morgue, and my parents were discussing cake and party decorations. I tried to reason with them, my voice cracking, reminding them that this was Daniel's funeral, not some casual gathering. My mother sighed softly, as if I were being unreasonable, and repeated herself. "We can't come." That was it. No urgency, no desperation, no attempt to comfort me. Just a decision, delivered like a scheduling conflict. When the call ended, I sat there in my empty living room, surrounded by Daniel's things, feeling a kind of loneliness I had never known before. Grief is already a cruel, suffocating experience. But there is something uniquely devastating about realizing the people you believed would always stand beside you have chosen not to. The funeral came and went in a haze of tears and numbness. Friends held my hands, strangers offered condolences, and every sympathetic glance reminded me of who was missing. There were 2 empty seats that seemed louder than the entire room. I kept imagining my parents walking in at the last minute, apologizing, saying they had made a terrible mistake. But those doors never opened. Later, I would see photos online of my sister's birthday party. Bright smiles, balloons, my parents beaming proudly at her side. The contrast made my stomach twist. While I was saying goodbye to my husband, they were singing "Happy Birthday." Something inside me hardened that day. Something fragile that would never fully return to what it once was. I stopped calling as often. Conversations became shorter, strained, filled with things we carefully avoided mentioning. They behaved as though nothing irreparable had occurred, as though their absence had been unfortunate but ultimately trivial. But for me, it was neither trivial nor forgettable. It became a silent line drawn between us, a quiet understanding that when I needed them most, they had chosen convenience over compassion. I tried to move forward, to rebuild some sense of normalcy from the wreckage of my life. But grief has a way of magnifying every memory, every hurt. Nights were the worst. The house felt unbearably quiet, and my thoughts inevitably drifted back to that phone call, to those words that felt so small, yet carried such enormous weight. "Today is your sister's birthday. We can't come." I replayed it again and again, searching for some hidden meaning, some justification that might make it hurt less. None ever came. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't possibly have predicted, was that this decision, This single moment of indifference would not be the end of the story. It would only be the beginning. 6 months passed, yet the wound my parents left behind never truly closed. Grief does not move in a straight line. It circles. It ambushes. It waits for moments of quiet to strike with full force. I was still learning how to exist in a world without Daniel. Still waking up some mornings with that split second of forgetting, only to be crushed again by reality. But somewhere inside that pain, something else had begun to grow. Not revenge in the dramatic sense. Not some elaborate plan to make anyone suffer, but a quiet determination to survive, to rebuild, to become someone even tragedy could not erase. Daniel had always believed in me with a certainty that felt almost unreasonable. "You're stronger than you think, Sid," he used to say whenever I doubted myself. After he was gone, those words became both comfort and challenge. I threw myself into work, into long hours and relentless focus, partly to distract myself, partly because standing still felt unbearable. What started as mere coping slowly turned into momentum. An opportunity emerged at my company, a demanding project everyone else avoided, a risky venture with no guaranteed success. Old Sydney might have hesitated, but grief had stripped away my fear of failure. When you've already lost everything that matters, professional risks feel almost trivial. I took it. I worked like my life depended on it. Nights blending into mornings, exhaustion becoming routine. There was no applause, no dramatic turning point, just persistence, and then, unexpectedly, success. The project exploded beyond expectations, bringing recognition I never sought but could not avoid. Interviews followed, articles, my name appearing in places that once felt impossibly distant. It was surreal, almost disorienting, seeing my face attached to headlines discussing resilience, leadership, and determination. People called me inspiring, unaware of the nights I still cried alone. And then, one ordinary afternoon, everything shifted again. My phone rang, my mother's name glowing on the screen. We had spoken occasionally over the months, polite, cautious conversations that never touched the funeral, never touched the fracture between us. But this call felt different from the first second. Her voice was tight, shaky, carrying a kind of urgency I had never heard from her before. "Sydney," she said, breath unsteady, "we need to talk." There was no mention of birthdays, no casual tone, only anxiety. Confused, I listened as she stumbled through her words, mentioning an article, a news piece, something they had seen that morning. My father came on the line next, his voice unusually strained. "We didn't know," he said, almost whispering. "We didn't understand how far you'd gone." It took me a moment to grasp what was happening. They had seen the headlines. They had seen my name, my success, my life moving forward without them. And suddenly the same parents who once calmly told me, "Today is your sister's birthday. We can't come," were now speaking with something close to desperation. Over the following days, their calls multiplied. The distance they once maintained evaporated, replaced by a flood of messages, apologies, invitations to meet. When I finally agreed to see them, curiosity mingled with a deep, guarded hesitation. Sitting across from them felt strangely unfamiliar, as though we were actors playing roles we barely remembered. My mother's eyes filled with tears almost immediately. My father looked older, smaller somehow. And then came the words I never expected yet instantly recognized for what they were: regret. "We made a terrible mistake," my mother said, voice breaking. "We should have been there. We should have chosen you." My father nodded, his composure cracking. We thought there would be more time to fix things." There it was. The realization too many people reach too late. That some moments cannot be undone. Some absences cannot be erased. They spoke of guilt, of sleepless nights, of the shame they felt watching the world celebrate the daughter. They had failed when she needed them most. They asked for forgiveness, not with pride, but with visible fear of losing me entirely. It would be easy to imagine that this was the triumphant ending, the dramatic reversal where everything magically heals. But reality is more complicated. Pain does not vanish because apologies arrive. Trust does not instantly regenerate because regret is expressed. I listened quietly, my emotions tangled. My heart pulled between lingering hurt and the undeniable truth that they were still my parents, Flawed and human. Do you know what hurt the most? I finally asked, my voice steadier than I felt. It wasn't just that you didn't come. It was how easy the decision sounded. Silence followed, heavy and unavoidable. They had no defense, no explanation that could soften that truth. In that moment, I understood something important. Their begging was real, their remorse genuine. But the past remained unchanged. Forgiveness, if it came, would not be a single grand gesture but a slow, uncertain process. I left that meeting with no dramatic declarations, only a quiet acknowledgement that rebuilding anything would take time. Life, however, has a strange way of teaching lessons through contrast. The same world that once felt brutally empty had pushed me to discover strengths I never knew I possessed. The same loneliness that nearly broke me had forged independence I never intended to develop. My parents' absence, painful as it was, had forced me to rely on myself, to grow in ways comfort might never have allowed. Their begging did not rewrite history, but it revealed something equally powerful. The choices have consequences. That love neglected can become love feared lost. If you're watching this and feeling overlooked, underestimated, or taken for granted, remember this. Your worth is not determined by who shows up late. Sometimes, the greatest transformations are born from the deepest disappointments.